talking about the latest unfounded theory the president is promoting on Twitter that President Obama wiretapped his phones in Trump Tower in the weeks leading up to the election. There is zero evidence for this. Multiple former senior officials are dismissing this nonsense, and as we reported, a source tells CNN that FBI Director James Comey was, quote, incredulous about the president's allegation. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer was asked about President Trump's view of Comey right now, whether he has the president's confidence. Listen.
We've only heard unsubstantiated anonymous sources make those claims. I don't think Director Comey has actually commented on anything that he has allegedly said. So I'm not going to comment on what people say he might have said. I think the director is more than capable of speaking for himself.
But what about the president's view of the FBI director?
Well, I even asked him that yet. I think obviously he's focused today first and foremost on this effort to keep the country safe.
Back now with the panel. Congressman Kingston, this whole notion, Donald Trump, if he had really wanted to get to the bottom of this, there doesn't need to be a congressional investigation, because he could, as General Hayden was saying earlier, he could pick up the phone and get the information himself. He could declassif it.
I think he could do it very quickly. I think the Intel Committee is going to turn it around very quickly as well. It's
faster than a phone call? If he really believed it, wouldn't he just pick up the phone?
I think he could, and I'm not going to put another conspiracy theory out there, but maybe he did. Maybe he did before he tweeted that, and maybe there is something that he knows. Nothing is impossible in this political environment. But I think.
Do you believe, though, I'll tell you, 6:20 in the morning, Mar-a-Lago.
I listened to Mark Levin's full statement on this, and I think he was the guy who really kicked this thing off.
Breitbart reported based on Mark Levin.
Yeah, but he quoted McClatchy, Washington Post, New York Times, The Guardian, and he said they're all alluding to law enforcement surveillance of Trump and Trump connections to Russia. And so I think under the idea of, one side always uses anonymous sources, and
but let's just zero in on that, because actually the reporting on the in order to do that, you would need a FISA court, unless he's alleging that this was some sort of secret shop.
I think, but we do know that
and the only reporting on the FISA
there was an application for a FISA court order in June, and apparently there was in October.
This is according to Heat Street, which doesn't really have a firm track record with its sources in the intelligence.
But remember, New York Times, January 19th, had an article that said that there has been evidence intercepted, which is a really strange word, intercepted on communication and transaction between the Trump-Russia connection in the campaign. Where did that come from?
Right. I can tell you. Intercepts on the most obvious theory is intercepts on the Russian ambassador would not be out of the realm of, possibility.
But this wasn't about the Flynn. I would say yes. They were following the Russian ambassador, and that's how they found out about the Flynn phone call. But this was different. This was about a computer that had a connection to a bank from the Trump campaign.
In Trump Tower. Jen would.
Look, I think there's a couple scenarios here that we've already talked about. Either this is completely false, or the Justice Department and the FBI had enough information to get a warrant from a FISA court, and they did that, and they have every authority to do that.
Or a criminal court.
Or a criminal court. You're right. So there's two options, as you've already talked about in your show. So the question is, why on earth would there be an investigation? What are we even talking about here? And the effort to do that, or the proposal to do that by the Trump team, seems to be another in a pattern of calling for an internal or external investigation to move the focus away from the larger issue at hand, which is their connections to Russia.
Kayleigh, I do keep coming back to the ease with which the president could just pick up a phone and find out this information if he wanted to.
Yes, he could do that with ease, and I do think that we will get more information on this as the days go by. I don't think the timeline is necessarily suggestive of there being no information. To Congressman Kingston's point, that January 19th New York Times article, the headline was actually "Wiretap Data Used in Inquiry of Trump Aides." Now, I agree with you that perhaps it's not wiretapping of Trump directly. Perhaps it was tapping, a Russian official, and pursuant to that, there were intercepted communications. Perhaps it was tapping someone else within his organization. But it is still an extraordinary concept that even if it was pursuant to a criminal investigation, as Jen suggests, that you would have a sitting Democratic administration.
But we could know this by now. The president could know this by now by picking up the phone if he really believed this. And if he's really that mad about this, he can find out the information. He's the most powerful guy in the United States, in the world.
And he might have that information, though. And I know that his White House counsel has been working to try to figure out this information, get it out there. I just think it's a process.
Right. But if he had that information, why is he saying it's that it's President Obama who did this personally, and why is he calling it for congressional investigation to find out when, in fact, he could find out?
But he might be sending a signal on that. He may be sending a signal that I think some on Capitol Hill.
I'll just say a couple of
questions later.
Obvious things. It's just obvious things. As a guy who worked in a White House, as did you. This is weird. This is bizarre. This is not how it's done. Usually, when you have a president, the words that come out of the president's mouth for the staff are precious. You go through incredible amounts of work, vetting back and forth, arguing. Can he say this? Can he say that? Take that comma out. I literally was in meetings arguing about commas and semicolons, because when the president says it, the whole world is going to take this very, very seriously. And so if it's true, here's my problem. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is true. Maybe he knows. This is the worst possible way then to go about exposing possibly the biggest crime committed by any president. You don't tweet it out in the morning. And we've got to stop pretending this sort of stuff is normal. This is not normal.
By the way, this is the same president who has also suggested the largest voter fraud in the history of this country and called for an investigation. But that was a couple weeks ago, and maybe it's
right.
Maybe the investigation's
One of the things that Donald Trump benefits from is the fact that a lot of Americans, if you ask them, who do you trust more, Donald Trump or the media, most Donald Trump voters, unsurprisingly, a surprising swath of the American public says, look, I would trust Donald Trump if something that he said directly contradicted something that the media said. Now, granted, the media is also not a monolith. What's sort of bizarre about this is that in this case, it's the president trusting the media, if you count sort of Breitbart or Mark Levin in the media, over his own government. So the reason this can exist is because you have this scrambling of who feels they can trust whom, whether it's the government, the media.
It's even more bizarre than that, because the underlying stories that Breitbart and Levin are relying on are from, as you were pointing out, the BBC, I believe,
Guardian and Heat
Street,
New York Times.
So there were some credible reports that there was a FISA warrant, right?
The credible reports weren't about President Obama ordering it.
Absolutely.
Right. And by the way, Mark Levin and Breitbart were not saying that President Obama ordered this. The president has made that.
But remember this when we talk about bizarro land. Here we have all Democrats throughout the fruited plain yesterday embracing James Clapper because he said he would have known about it and it did not happen. Now, this was the same guy that 3 years ago they wanted to convict of perjury because he said that the federal government was not gathering information on American citizens. And then a guy named Edward Snowden.
Amazing that politicians are hypocrites. Carl, go ahead.
I want to cut to the chase here. You know, the president referred to Watergate here and Nixon/Watergate. The great thing that happened in Watergate was that the heroes of Watergate were Republicans. They were Republicans in the Senate who unanimously voted to create a select committee to investigate the presidential campaign activities of 1972. And we have seen nothing similar from the Republicans in this, which is to say the creation of a nonpartisan investigation, a bipartisan investigation, a select committee of the Senate of the United States or a special prosecutor that gets to the bottom of this, including President Trump's allegations about his predecessor. That's what's needed here, is a fair, impartial, non- or bipartisan investigation. And it can look at, indeed, what, first of all, there was not, the fact that there is no,
there was a break-in with what?
Jack, that has not, there has been, as we know, an election in the United States which 16 or 17 intelligence agencies in the United States have said was altered or attempted to be altered by a hostile foreign power. If that's not enough reason to have a select, let me finish.
We got to take a break. So Carl, just finish your thought
for 1 sec. If that is not enough reason for a select committee of the Senate of the United States to go ahead, there does not need to be a crime, Jack. There have been numerous select investigations. You should know this as a legislator.
Well, also a break-in into a
crime.
I mean, a break into a computer is, it doesn't have to be a break into an office anymore. I mean,
Jack,
things have
it's time to get off the talking points. It's time to get real about learning what happened. That's what Republicans ought to be concerned about.
We got to take a quick break. coming up. We're going to have more on this. Also, travel ban take two. President Trump signs a revised version of his executive order targeting refugees and travel from several Muslim-majority countries. We'll look at what's different and what has stayed the same. And we'll speak with the Attorney General from Washington, who got the first version of the travel ban blocked.
An entire legal team at the Office of Attorney General, they have been working